Welcome to the Help Me Abide podcast, a program dedicated to helping you have a closer walk with God by sharing biblical truths and relatable testimonies of women who have overcome. Whether you're a seasoned believer or just starting your spiritual journey, this podcast has something for you. Each episode will supply encouragement and wise, practical advice to inspire and challenge you to abide in the one who has all the answers to life's questions. A woman who abides in the shadow of the Almighty is a woman who lives safe and secure. Sit back and enjoy a few minutes of positive conversation with your host, Jennifer Beal, and friends.
Help me abide in the one who has the power. Help me abide each day and every hour. Remind me that without you, my efforts are in vain, so that others will see you. Help me abide.
Welcome to the Help Me Abide podcast. Today's episode, we are so happy to have one of my very favorite friends, Lindsey Osgood, as our guest. Lindsey is a missionary who has dedicated her life to serving the people of Ghana, West Africa. She has been living on the mission field for over 17 years, working tirelessly to proclaim the gospel to the Ghanaian people. In addition to her missionary work, Lindsey is a talented musician. She serves as a music coordinator for her church in Africa and teaches piano classes. Her music ministry has expanded as she has begun writing her own songs. There is nothing fake about Lindsey Osgood. She doesn't pretend to be something she isn't. I have always admired her passion to make sure things are done right and her perseverance to endure hard things for the cause of Christ. Her favorite food in Ghana is also my all-time favorite food in Ghana, groundnut soup and imotua, which is like a rice ball. Join us as we learn more about her inspiring journey and the incredible work she is doing to help those in need of Jesus.
My name is Lindsey Osgood. My husband and I serve as missionaries in Ghana, West Africa. For 17 years, we have had the privilege of serving on Team Ghana, which is sent out of First Baptist Church of Hammond, Indiana. I had the privilege of growing up in a wonderful Christian home. My parents are Jeff and Karen Rhodes. They went to Hyles-Anderson College as a married couple, and my dad graduated in 1985. They have been serving God faithfully in the ministry for 38 years. My parents are my heroes, and their testimonies and love for God made me believe that there was no greater life than to serve God. I was saved at a young age, but struggled with assurance of my salvation. At age 13, I got my salvation settled, and when I was 14 years old, I surrendered to full-time Christian service at pastor school under Dr. Hyles. In my mind, this meant being an assistant pastor's wife or pastor's wife of a little church somewhere in America. I never even considered the possibility of being a missionary. Upon graduating from high school, I attended Hyles-Anderson College. For the first couple of years in college, I was dating a young man from my home church. But I did not have peace about our relationship, so I broke up with him the beginning of my junior year. This was a very difficult time in my life. I felt like my plan was slipping through my fingers. My plan was to go to Bible college, graduate in 4 years with a diploma and a husband, and go work in a nice little church somewhere in America. But God was showing me that that was precisely the problem. This was my plan, and He wanted me to do His plan. I decided to make it a matter of serious prayer. I prayed as often as I could, and on Wednesdays, I fasted and prayed for my future husband. What started out as a mission to pray down a husband from God ended up in one of the best journeys of my life. Over the next couple of months, God became so real to me, and I enjoyed spending time with Him so much. During this time, I made 2 promises to God. First, that I would read 3 chapters of the Bible and pray 30 minutes a day. And second, if He gave me a man after His own heart, I would never come between him and whatever God asked him to do. I would follow that man anywhere. Also, during my junior year, Missionary Mark Bachman came and preached our missions conference. It was during that conference that the Holy Spirit began softening my heart towards the idea of being a missionary. At pastor school that same year, the concept of team missions was introduced, and God made it clear to me that He wanted me to be involved in team missions. With the exception of my parents, I didn't talk about the work that God was doing in my heart and mind. I didn't pursue missions or start taking missions classes or decide that I was only going to date a man who was going to be a missionary. I firmly believed that it was a woman's job to follow a man, and this belief simply led me to the conclusion that if God wanted me to be a missionary, then somehow He would make it happen. It wasn't something that I needed to chase after. At the beginning of my senior year, Charles Osgood asked me on a date, and I said yes. We went on a date, and I had a nice time, and I thought he was a really nice guy. But honestly, it was nothing earth-shattering. After our date, I went back to my dorm room, got on my knees, and asked God if Charles was the one. And the peace of God flooded my heart in such a miraculous way. I knew that he was the man God wanted me to marry. At this time, Charles did not have plans to be a missionary, and I never told him that I had felt God was leading me towards the mission field, but I had complete peace about dating him. That semester, the college had another missions conference, but I was student teaching, so I was not able to attend. When I got home from student teaching, Charles met me and said that we needed to talk. He took me to Roloff Park and told me that he had just surrendered to team missions, and he was wondering how I felt about it and whether or not I would want to continue dating him. Of course, I was overjoyed to see God's divine hand in our lives. To my shame, I did not keep my promise to read 3 chapters of the Bible and pray 30 minutes a day, and guilt set in. And then I started dating Charles, and I found it very difficult to balance my love for God and my love for Charles. Instead of God consuming my heart and mind, Charles was consuming my heart and mind. I felt like God had given me my desire, and I betrayed him. And even more guilt set in. It felt as if little by little, a wall was being built between me and God. Although I would ask God for forgiveness, I didn't feel forgiven. I should have gone to someone for help, but I had been taught to fake it until you make it, which led me to depend on myself and filled my heart with pride. In March of 2006, 1 week before pastor school, we were asked if we would join the Ghana team. We said yes, and the last night of pastor school, we were ushered through the 2 doors on the platform and presented as part of Team Ghana. I hadn't told anyone that we were asked to be on the Ghana team, except my family, and I think most people that knew me were in complete shock. Many years later, a couple of the staff members revealed to me that when they saw me come out on that platform, their first thought was, "Oh my goodness, she is never going to make it in Africa." I guess in some people's minds, I was a little bit of a diva, although I didn't see myself that way. But to be fair, I do remember shortly after God calling me to be a missionary, having a conversation with him that went something like, "All right, God, I'll be a missionary, but I'm not going to look like a missionary," which was a horrible thing to say. I guess I had the perception that missionaries were dowdy, and I didn't want to be dowdy. So I guess these staff members were probably justified in their thoughts about me. Charles and I were married on June 24th, 2006, and arrived in Ghana 4 months later, on October 24th. Being a missionary was a lot harder than I'd ever imagined it would be. Seasons of loneliness, and many different sicknesses, culture shock, giving birth to my first child in a third world country, my 9-month-old baby getting malaria, financial difficulties. Our team went through 3 leadership changes in the first 3 years, and we watched as one by one all the families we came with left. And there were some days that I just needed to talk about it, but I was too scared to talk about it because I thought maybe it would discourage my husband and he would leave the field, and then I would be guilty of breaking the other promise I had made to God. Although it was foolish to think that it was my responsibility to keep my husband on the field, I was already living under so much guilt from breaking the first promise that the idea of experiencing more guilt was too much to bear. So for the first 7 years, I kept all these feelings bottled up inside of me. Except, every once in a while, my emotions would spill out. We know that the Bible says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. When I was having a particularly hard day, maybe I dropped a dish and it shattered all over the floor, I would say, I hate my life. And usually I would smack the table or the countertop as I said it. I honestly didn't even realize that I was saying it out loud until one day my husband looked at me and with a kind but hurt voice said, "Why do you say that? It really hurts me when you say that." For the first time, I was confronted with what was really going on inside of my heart and mind. But fear and, honestly, pride kept me from being able to articulate it. Because of that wall between me and God, my walk with God was virtually non-existent, and I was trying to do God's work in my own strength while carrying this heavy burden. It got to the point that I hated my life, and I didn't want to live anymore. One Sunday morning, after hearing a very convicting message about being yielded to the Spirit, I realized how far away from God I was. But honestly, I didn't even know how to get back to Him. I prayed and asked God to please do something in my life, to either change me or kill me, because I couldn't live like this any longer. The next morning, I woke up violently ill, and we went to the hospital and found out that I had sepsis, which is an infection in the blood and very serious. The pain was excruciating, and I felt like I was dying. But a few days later, after a lot of antibiotics, I started feeling better, and I remember thinking, God, what are you doing? Just kill me already. I don't understand how giving me sepsis is going to help. But what I didn't understand was that God was in the process of breaking me. Sepsis was the last straw. I had already experienced so much pain and heartache on the mission field that my flesh could not be strong anymore. And I started opening up to my husband and sharing my heart with him. And that is exactly what needed to happen. A few weeks after getting sepsis, we were in the States for a furlough, and I remember telling Charles that I didn't know if I could go back to Ghana. But when the time came, God gave me the grace to step on that airplane. As we landed in Ghana and began walking towards the exit of the plane, it took everything inside of me to put one foot in front of the other. With tears brimming my eyes, I remember thinking, maybe I should just fall down at the stewardess' feet and beg her to take me back with her. I had been faithful to stay where God wanted me to be, but now what? I couldn't live a lie. I couldn't live a life that I hated. In desperation, I started praying that God would change my heart, that He would make His wants my wants, and His desires my desires. Honestly, when I started praying this prayer, I'm not sure that I even believed it would work. After a couple years of continually praying and begging God to change my heart, and more importantly, Charles and I scheduled a time once a week to pray together. I watched as God slowly but miraculously started changing my heart. Where I thought I just needed to try harder, God taught me that I needed to humble myself, surrender, and die. Philippians 2:13 says, "For it is God which worketh in you, both to will and to do His good pleasure." I learned that if I was simply willing to humble myself, God could actually change my heart and mind to want to do His will. What I saw as guilt, God saw as pride. Why wouldn't I just go to Charles and tell him about breaking my promise to God and ask for help? Because of my pride. I didn't want him to know. But James 5:16 says, "Confess your faults one to another and pray for one another, that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much." God doesn't tell us to fake it until you make it. He tells us to confess your faults. Why? Because confessing your faults forces you to humble yourself. God had to break me and get me to a place where I was willing to humble myself confess my faults, and ask for help. My husband and I were introduced to Brother Marvin Smith's spiritual warfare materials. My husband bought his books, studied them, and used them to help me get victory over my guilt and restore my relationship with God. 2 years after getting sepsis, God gave me the song, Glad I Laid Down My Life, which will be played at the end of this podcast. I wrote this song with several verses in mind, but 2 verses that have really helped me through the years are 1 Peter 4:12-13, which say, Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened to you, but rejoice, inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's suffering, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy. We tend to focus on this life, the temporal. God tells us that there will be trials and suffering in this life, but he also says that if we are faithful to live a surrendered life, the trials that we face will pale in comparison to the joy that we will receive in heaven. After getting sepsis, my health has never been the same. I live with chronic health issues. And there was a period of time when I was tempted to use my health as an excuse to leave Ghana. Let me be clear. I do not say this in judgment of any missionary who has had to leave the field because of health issues. And truthfully, someday I may have to leave the field because of my health. But during this time, I spent a lot of time studying about health and natural healing and came to the conclusion that if I wanted to be healed, I would need to eat a very specific diet, which was impossible to maintain in Ghana because the grocery stores didn't sell the ingredients that I needed. This led to fear and frustration, and I started to believe that I had to go back to America in order to survive. My husband spent several days fasting and praying to find out God's will on the matter. At the end of this time, he came to me and said, Lindsey, I really believe that the Holy Spirit told me that you're going to be okay. My immediate thought was, seriously? I'm not sure you heard him correctly. But I trusted and obeyed. And after some time, I realized that I was guilty of having the same attitude as the Israelites who said, Can God furnish a table in the wilderness? I lacked faith and doubted God's ability to take care of me. I began praying that somehow God would bring the things that I needed for my health here to Ghana so that I would have access to them. And after faithful prayer, slowly, over time, God started bringing the things that I needed for my health to Ghana. We still don't have access to everything that I would like to have, but our options today are exponentially greater than they were. God has shown me that I can trust him with everything, even my health. Where I used to pray for healing, now I pray that my hunger and thirst to know God will be greater than my desire for healing. I have not arrived in my Christian life. Every day it is a battle to die to self, and truthfully, many days I don't win. But God is a gracious, gentle shepherd who continues to teach me and to show me that he can be trusted, that his word is true, and that his way is the best way.
Connie Marujo here, resource promoter for the Help Me Abide podcast. Looking for beautiful Christ-centered music to help inspire and encourage you? Lindsey Osgood is not only a missionary, but she is also a songwriter and a singer. Lindsey wrote the song Help Me Abide, which was the inspiration for our podcast name. She has also written more songs, one of which will be premiered at the end of this episode. With MP3s and sheet music available for purchase, you can bring the beauty of Lindsey's music into your everyday life. So why wait? Head on over to helpmeabide.com to browse your selection and discover the power of music to inspire and uplift your soul.
Welcome, listeners. I'm elated to introduce you to Mrs. Lindsey Osgood, missionary to Ghana, West Africa. Lindsey, welcome to the Help Me Abide podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here, friend.
Yay. So I know Lindsey from when we were in Africa. Lindsey is, I don't know if she considers me this, but Lindsey is one of my very best friends.
Yes,
I
I
love her.
do.
Yay. We are nothing alike, but at the same
Complete opposite.
complete opposites, but that kind of, I don't know,
Opposites
endears us
attract.
to each other. There
Yeah.
you go. Opposites attract. I love Lindsey very much. When Jessica Smallwood told me that she would be concluding the podcast and the Lord was leading me to start one, Lindsey was the first person I thought of. She has been sending me her music throughout, I don't know, the last year, Linz, or has it been longer than that?
Well, yeah, 2019 was when I started writing. I wrote one song in 2015 and then nothing. And then 2019 was when God started giving me songs.
Yeah, so she started sending me songs, and I thought the world needs to hear Lindsey's music, but she lives in Africa. She can't come back here. I guess recording music is expensive. I wanted to be able to display her music. So the first thing I thought when starting a podcast was, I want Lindsey's music on my podcast. So that
Yay.
evolved into Lindsey is now on our team.
Yes.
And she is our music lady because I know nothing about music. Again, opposites totally. So what I love about Lindsey is I love that Lindsey's real. She's not a fake at all. She'll let you know. And I like having friends that sharpen me. So I've always respected her desire to serve God, and I've respected her honesty because I don't know. I just like to be around people who are honest. I don't want the fake stuff. So she's the real deal.
And I can say the exact same thing about you.
Oh, yay. I love friends. Christian friends are a treasure, 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 treasure. And I feel like I have the best of them. So I'm grateful. We've already heard her testimonies. So we're going to skip up into, and you've kind of answered a lot of these questions. I get that in the testimony, but we're going to answer them again because I want to talk to you. So thanks. Okay.
Yay.
What challenges have you faced while living in Ghana?
I would say for me, it's been having the mindset that I deserve certain things. And I wouldn't say that this is exclusive to being a missionary or exclusive to being in Ghana. But if I look back at one of the biggest things that I know I have struggled with, it's been the mindset that I deserve certain things. And I think that there's two different reasons that I struggle with this. One would be just the privilege of growing up as an American. We have so much. Even if we ourselves are not necessarily well off, there's still so much that America itself has to offer, even poor people.
Yes. The people in Africa, I remember this, and Brett uses this as an illustration all the time. They would laugh at our poor homeless people because they said, your poor homeless people are fat. Like, that is not poor. They have food. And it's so true because when you're got poor homeless people in Ghana, they're skin and bones without clothes on. Like poor, they can't afford clothes. They can't afford food. You cannot even fathom or understand the poverty that these people live in. So yes, it's a different world.
Exactly. And in America, you have public parks. You know, like there's just so many things. Like it's hard to even really put all the different things that even if you're poor, you still have access to.
Exactly. You're still living rich compared to a large percent of the rest of the world.
It is a privilege to grow up in America, and just the fact of being American, you have a lot to be grateful for. But then also, I just had a great childhood. I didn't have any real struggles. No health problems in my family. My dad was an assistant pastor, great parents, great home, great church. I just did not have any type of huge problems in my childhood, teen years, young adult life. And I think that was wonderful. I loved it. I enjoyed it. God was really good to me. And so I never experienced suffering.
I don't know how many times I've thought I want to go back to my childhood. And then even with my kids, when I'm raising my kids, I'm thinking, these are the best days of your life. I hope you're really enjoying them because you have no responsibility. You have no stress. You have no pressure. Yes, those were very, very happy times.
Also, I think that I had this mindset, and I don't know where it came from, and I'm not blaming anybody but myself, that if I checked off all the boxes, then I would have a perfect life.
Yes.
If I obeyed my authorities, if I went to Bible college, if I wore skirts and dresses, if I went to the wedding altar pure, if I, checked all the boxes, then I would just have this miraculously perfect life. And obviously that's not true. The Bible does not say, even the remotest terms, that is true. It's not like I grew up in, a charismatic church that taught prosperity gospel. So I really have no idea where that mindset came from, but I definitely had that mindset.
I agree. I don't think it's how we were raised. I don't think it's what our parents taught us. I don't think that it's the preaching didn't hit on it. But I thought if I did X, Y, and Z, I'm going to have this perfect life in this huge house with this white picket fence. And my children are all going to say, yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, to everything and not rebel at all. I think it's the enemy creating that non-realistic world to us so that when it falls apart, we think, what, God, you're not good? I did everything right. So then you start to accuse God like he's done something wrong.
Exactly. So coming to the mission field, at the time, third world country, we've been here for 17 years. So when we came, it was classified as third world. I think that there was a long process that I had to go through to realize that I did not deserve anything except for death and hell. That's what I deserve. Many years ago, I did read a book. It's called Have We No Rights by Mabel Williamson, who was actually a missionary and maybe still is, I'm not sure, in Liberia. Each chapter is basically her debunking the idea that we have a right to certain things. I'll just lift off a few of the chapters. The right to what I consider to be a normal standard of living, the right of the ordinary safeguards of good health, the right to privacy, the right to my own time, the right to live with the people of my choice. So she just each chapter is just, and there's other chapters
in
too,
your
but
face. Wow.
Yes. Just debunking the fact that you have no rights.
Yeah.
Even though God has worked on me in that area for 17 years, I still get tripped up sometimes. This flesh still takes over, and sometimes I feel like I have the right to decent air quality. All of our neighbors burn toxic trash all around me. There's cancer causing air, and it can get frustrating. But then I have to remember I do not have the right to decent air quality. When you were living here, how the noise. I mean, I have a man who lives right outside of my kitchen window who loves hip hop music, and he loves to blare it at the top of how high he can get it. And I have to believe that I do not have the right to peace and quiet. In Ghana, sometimes they do wake keepings where they have speaker systems that are taller than my house, and they're blaring rock and roll music all night long and all day long for their funerals. And, you just want to sleep. Like, God, I just want a good night's sleep.
Yes.
And, you don't have the right to good sleep.
Yes.
And so it's a process. It's a lifelong process. I have not arrived.
But then we have to go back to, we don't deserve anything. We deserve death and hell. And anything good that happens in our life is grace and mercy. And that's the truth. But I also could relate to Lindsey. It is the truth, and I have learned it 750 million times. But here I am again today, struggling with that same truth, struggling with the same surrender.
There was another thing that really helped me in this area. He was a missionary to Papua New Guinea. He is dead now, but his name was Otto Koning, and you can find his I guess they would be sermons, although he doesn't teach in a sermon way. He's very much more of a teacher.
Yes.
One of his sermons is called The Pineapple Story. And the whole thing is learning to surrender your rights. And I listened to that several years ago, and that really hit home. And I really realized how that is a daily process, and it's a mindset, and it's something that I have to continue to work on. But it's important to daily surrender your rights and to daily ask God to give you that mindset. But I would say that the flip side of that coin would be, I didn't deserve that.
Yeah.
We have this one side of this that says, I deserve this. And then this other side of us, when something bad happens and we want to shake our fist at God and say, I didn't deserve that.
Right.
Some verses that God has used in my heart to really convict me in this area. 3 verses in Psalms, and they all talk about having a fixed heart. Psalm 57:7 says, my heart is fixed, O God, my heart is fixed. I will sing and give praise. This psalm is believed to be penned by David when he was on the run from Saul. And then we have Psalms 108:1, which says, O God, my heart is fixed. I will sing and give praise, even with my glory. This psalm was also believed to be penned by David. And then we have Psalms 112:7, where it says, he shall not be afraid of evil tidings. His heart is fixed, trusting in the Lord.
Amen.
This particular chapter, Psalms 112, is talking about the attributes of the man who fears God. So if you read that chapter, every verse is talking about a different attribute of a man who fears God. In verse 7, it says, this man's heart is fixed.
Yeah.
He shall not be afraid of evil tidings. And I just asked myself, like, whoa, how far away from that am I? Like, if it, when something bad happens to me, is my first reaction to have a fixed heart that's trusting God? No. My first reaction is to question God, to doubt instead of trust God, which ultimately and every time leads to discontentment and eventually, for me, depression. I said in the beginning of the podcast how my health has been a huge problem for me for many years, ever since getting sepsis, especially. And so let's just take the last 7 months of my life. At Christmas time and New Year's, I got very, very sick with some type of flu bug. I don't know. Very, very sick. Then in February, I was hospitalized with what the doctors believe was probably COVID. I did not get tested because they did not have testing at that particular hospital. And by the time I was there for a couple of days, he's like, oh, well, we could send you to this other place to get testing if you want to find out for sure if it's COVID. And by then I was getting better, and I'm just like, you know what? I don't really care. Let's just keep on the medicine and I'll go home.
Yeah.
And then,
let's go home.
Whatever. I have all the COVID symptoms. You think I have COVID. I think I have COVID. It doesn't really matter. Then in March, I started getting this pain in my jaw. Started as me just feeling really run down, like my immune system was just really fighting something. And then it led to this pain in my jaw. I know that pain because 2 years earlier, I had gone back to the States to get a lot of work done on my teeth, thousands of dollars spent to get work done on my teeth because of that same pain that was in my jaw. Up to this point, I've had 6 teeth removed. So I'm thinking, okay, the pain is back. Now I'm going to get tooth number 7 removed. And
Wow.
I'm getting angry. I'm starting to say, God, this isn't fair. Why? I need teeth. I deserve to have teeth. We go back to that. I deserve this. Again, we're just talking about the last 7 months. We're not talking about the last 10 years of my health issues.
Right.
And I know the pattern. I know what happens. I start getting sick. I start not trusting God. I start getting discontent. It leads to depression. So my jaw is hurting, and I'm like, God, I don't want to react the way I normally react. Please, please help me to respond correctly. Please teach me what it is that I need to learn so that this trial will not be in vain, that I can come forth as gold. I don't want this just to be the same cycle over and over and over again. I decide that I'm going to try to do something natural. I do believe in the body's ability to heal. So I decide that I'm going to basically go on like a ketogenic diet. I start basically just eating vegetables, meat, eggs, and healthy fats, butter, avocado, all those kind of things. Well, I weigh 100 pounds soaking wet, and I'm 5'6". So it didn't take very long for me to start losing weight, and it got to the place where I could barely walk. Now, I did feel like the pain was going away, but I was losing so much muscle mass, like to walk upstairs.
I mean, walking's important.
Yeah, kind of. Kind of. Yeah, it was bad. So I started gradually introducing in a few things like rice and potatoes. So I'm eating meat, mainly vegetables, like I said, but I'm adding rice and potatoes. And I still feel like it's getting better, but it's still not healed. I can still tell that it's there. I asked Molly Otis and the Ghana Circle to pray. I asked a lot of people to pray.
WMS people.
Yes, WMS people. And I believed that God could heal me if I knew he could, and I wanted to trust him. So I was trying so hard to do everything natural I could think of, plus asking lots of people to pray for me, plus praying myself. And that was good, but I still had lessons to learn. God brought to my attention the lessons from Otto Koning that I hadn't heard yet. One was called The Weapon of Rejoicing. And so I listened to that one. And after listening to that one, I started, whenever I would start to get discouraged, whenever the pain would come, I started just thanking God. Lord, thank you for this pain. I may not understand why you're allowing it, but I thank you for it because it is motivating me to eat healthier, which I should do. And that's good for me. And so I thank you for this pain. And I thank you for the truth that you're going to teach me through this pain. You know, again, it's still baby steps. This lasted over 2 months, that the pain was for 2 months. So I was still feeling myself trying to be swept under by that cycle, you know, over and over again of not wanting to trust God, not being content, turning into depression. And so I'm trying to ask God, please give me the tools to fight this, to be successful over this. So I learned about the tool of rejoicing, giving thanks. And so I started using that. And then I listened again to the pineapple story and how you're supposed to surrender everything to God. And so one day I got on my knees and I said, God, I surrender my teeth to you. Like, if you want me to be a toothless missionary in Ghana, I will be a toothless missionary in Ghana. I will serve you with teeth or without teeth. You are still good. You are still worthy. Like, I give you my teeth. I give you the right to have teeth. And at that point, I really thought, like, I was really close to setting up an appointment with the dentist here and having the tooth extracted. Like, that was within a week, I was going to do that. And I think the way that I know when I've actually surrendered something to God is once you do that, you stop worrying and fretting and having all this fear and anxiety, then okay, I've surrendered this to God.
Totally.
Yeah. So I did that. I'm still having the pain, but I've surrendered. I'm rejoicing. I'm doing everything that I know to do and having the attitude that God tells me to have. And within a couple weeks after that, the pain went away and has stayed gone. I haven't had the pain back.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me, do I believe God healed me? 100%. But I believe that I had to learn some things along the way that were important to learn. And I believe that having the correct mindset of when a trial comes and not allowing that knee-jerk reaction of something bad has happened, God is not fair, I can't trust him, now I'm discontent, and here's the depression. I highly recommend those lessons by Otto Koning. You can find them easily on YouTube. The Pineapple Story and The Weapon of Rejoicing literally have, I would like to say, changed my life. I believe that those truths are the truths that we need when we're going through a hard time. We need to know how to go through that hard time, how to get my heart fixed back on God. When those evil tidings come, what are the steps that I take to prevent the devil from having victory over my thoughts and my feelings and my emotions? And I believe that those are the things, some of the things that God has given us.
Yes.
So I hope that that makes sense.
Oh, all of it made perfect sense. Otto Koning, The Pineapple Story. It's a life changer. It's a game changer.
It is.
Because he just shares his testimony of surrender. And then I like how he says at the end, and then when you realize, you've given up full control because you don't have control anyway, and then you surrender it to God and he takes care of you, then God brings the next area of surrender. And this area of surrender happens to be Lindsey's teeth, which I cannot relate to, but Brett has, I want to say he's lost 7 teeth and he was only in Africa for 5 years. So pray for your missionary's teeth. Moral of the story.
True.
Something you could only get at the Help Me Abide podcast. And then something that you said was you knew that you surrendered when you stopped worrying about it. And I just read a book that I really enjoyed, The Christian Secret to a Happy Life. And a comment that was said in there was, when worry comes through the front door, faith jumps out the window.
Right.
And worry and faith cannot coincide. So if you're either going to practice your faith muscle or practice your worry muscle. And my worry muscle is like super strong. I'm like a bodybuilder in worry.
Yes.
And my faith muscle is very small, but with all my heart, I want my faith muscle to get bigger. Yes.
Back to that verse of that I said at the beginning, 1 Peter 4:12-13. It even talks about that weapon in there. Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you as though some strange thing happened to you, but rejoice. We're going back to the weapon of rejoicing, the weapon of giving thanks.
Yes.
Inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's suffering, that when his glory shall be revealed, you may be glad also with exceeding joy. And then, if you read 1 Peter, the whole book, it talks about suffering. And then at the end, 1 Peter 5:10, it says, but the God of all grace, who hath called us unto his eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after that ye have suffered a while, make you perfect, establish, strengthen, and settle you. Like, that is God's goal for you. His goal is to get you to a place where your heart is fixed. He has a purpose.
Yeah.
And it's not even just that. I mean, even if it was just that, then we should be grateful that he's trying to make us into his image. But in 2 Corinthians 4:17, it says, for our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. He is going to reward us based on our, for our suffering. It's not in vain. He sees, he knows every time we're going through something hard, and we trust him with that hard thing. He promises to reward. And so it's so important that we see the big picture and that we learn to trust him.
Yeah.
Believing that he's working everything for our good and for his glory.
Amen.
Yes.
For our good, his glory. Yes. Amen. I like how it says weapon of rejoicing, because we wrestle not against flesh and blood.
Exactly.
But against principalities. And I find when I recognize that the struggle, let's say I'm upset with Brett, or I'm upset with a child, or I'm upset with anybody, I have to remind myself they're not the enemy.
Right.
They are not the enemy.
Right.
Great peace have they that love thy law, and nothing shall offend them. The enemy is the enemy. And we could use the weapon of rejoicing, even
for the small things,
even in silly things.
Yes. Even in the small things, like living in Ghana, there is just this constant, like you lose power, you don't have water, there's just these constant drip of things that are, you could get frustrated about.
Yes.
You could allow to destroy your spirit. That's me, 100%. When something happens that I don't like, then I just automatically, I get annoyed. And God was just really, really convicting me about that. And so one day I was teaching music classes in the school, and the way the power is here, it's kind of complicated, but we didn't have power. And so the security man has to come and flip over the breaker box to ECG when the power comes back on. Well, whenever I'm teaching, the auditorium never gets flipped back over. The school does, the educational buildings do, the staff offices do, everything else does except for the auditorium where I'm teaching every single time.
Yeah, of course.
And so I always have to walk down a flight of stairs out of the auditorium and try to go find the security guard to get him to come and flip over the breaker box. And so every single time that happens, I'm stewing, like, I teach every Thursday at this time. They know they should flip over the breaker box. What is their problem? Why do I have to keep going over? You're going on and on and on in your head. And God was just like, Lindsey, rejoice, give thanks. And I was like, Lord, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to get extra exercise in. You know how much I need it. I'm just going on and on.
I love it.
You are so good. Thank you that we even have power. I mean, hey, I could live in a country where we don't even have power. I'm just trying so hard to think of things to thank God. Use my weapon of rejoicing.
Find the positive.
When I want to be complaining.
Yes.
And it's hard. Daily battle.
So good. I feel like you're preaching a sermon at me, Lindsey, and I'm loving it. The weapon of rejoicing.
I'm preaching a sermon at myself.
The weapon. Well, maybe we all need this sermon. It's a good one. And like you're saying, even the silly things, like something that is it really a big deal? Like I'm losing a tooth, big deal. but when we're having to walk a few, I'm not making your trial small, Lindsay.
No,
it is very big,
it's
and
true.
it is very real. But it's silly stuff. It's silly stuff.
It's true.
The
It
weapon
is.
of rejoicing. I love it. I have been sharpened today, Lindsay. Whenever we get together, we don't have enough time to talk, and I think we come up with very similar conclusions with very different circumstances. And I love how the Holy Spirit does that. Wherever you are, we have to deal with ourselves. And the different circumstances may be different. The different way the Lord peels us back into surrender may be different. But the truth is the same. Faith and surrender are the two keys for the Christian life. And it's not something that I don't think any of us will master until we are with him in heaven.
Sure.
So thank you, Lindsay, for sharing your story.
Such a pleasure to be here. And I'm so excited for this podcast to launch and so excited to see what God does through it and through all your hard work. Thank you so much for you and for all your hard work.
Oh, thank you, Lindsay. I'm excited. That's for sure. Like you said in the middle of the podcast, it's for our good and his glory. And I hope that we could inspire some young ladies to be willing to surrender their lives to be missionaries and to encourage missionaries on the field, and to also strengthen women in America, because we deal with, again, different circumstances, but the same trial. So
yeah, because I think that we deal with the different circumstances, but the exact same trial.
Yes. So I love you and I miss you and I can't wait to see you again. And keep the faith, my friend. I love you.
Love you too, Jen.
Man chose to sin, the plan had to change. A sacrifice must be made. The Father turned to the Son and looked in his eyes. Would you give up your heavenly home, your robe and crown, your kingly throne? And he said, I will lay down my life. I'll pay any price. I will be the sacrifice. Though the way seems so hard and the price seems so great, I will go, I will lay down my life. And the Father pleads today, the harvest is so great, a sacrifice must be made. And just as I asked my son, I'm turning now to you. Would you give up your hopes and dreams, your lifelong plans, your everything? Will you say, I will lay down my life? I'll pay any price. I will make a sacrifice. Though the way seems so hard and the price seems so great, I will go, I will lay down my life. And on that day, when all heaven and mankind stand before God's Son and watch Him glorified, tears of joy will be streaming down my face. If I know that I gave my Lord first place, I'm so glad I could do it all again, I still give up my plans. I'm so glad that I laid down my life.
Thank you so much for listening to the Help Me Abide podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as we did. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us on social media or through our podcast website, www.helpmeabide.com. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. The Help Me Abide podcast is a ministry of the Faith Baptist Church of Wildemar, California, pastored by Pastor Bruce Goddard. That being said, it's important to remember that this podcast is not a substitute for regular church attendance. We encourage all of our listeners to be faithful members of a local, independent, Bible-believing Baptist church. My heartfelt gratitude goes out to Mrs. Tammy Goddard, who facilitates the podcast, Lisa Grubb, who expertly directs our social media outreach, Connie Marujo, who tirelessly promotes our resources, and Lindsey Osgood, who provides the perfect musical accompaniment to the interviews. Without our amazing team, this podcast would not be possible. Also, big thanks to Faith Music Missions for allowing us to use their beautiful music on our podcast. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back soon with more inspiring content.